Okay, as you can see here in the bottom left, GPT-5, OpenAI's new model, is now available exclusively via the Cursor CLI. So as a Cursor user, you can install the CLI and use GPT-5 for coding tasks. So that's what I'm going to do in this video, and then I'm going to compare that against Claude Code. So we'll set up a split screen. We'll ask GPT-5 and Claude Code to do the same tasks within the same project environment, and then we'll see which one comes out on top. Okay, so for this test scenario, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use ElizaOS, which is a AI agentic framework. What I'm going to do is I'm going to provide the docs to each GPT-5 and Claude Code. I'm going to ask them to then create some directory-specific docs based on their analysis of the official documentation, and then from there we'll ask both models to create some code based on the documentation and then also build out some files in a project. So we'll use ElizaOS as the base, so it'll be the same environment and situation for both models. So we'll jump into Cursor. I'll split the screen with both ChatGPT-5 and Claude Code, and we'll see what the differences are in the output from each model. Okay, so we're in Cursor now. As you can see on the left-hand side, I've got the GPT-5 project with the GPT-5 Cursor chat. And then on the right-hand side, we've got the Claude Eliza agent project with the Claude Code extension open. So we're starting with a blank empty directory for both projects, and what we're going to do is we're just going to prompt each the same way and see what we end up with and which model provides a better result. So the first step is what we're going to do is we're going to provide context. So what we want is each model to fetch the official documentation for ElizaOS so that it can review how the platform works, what the built-in architecture is that it has access to leverage for some code builds and projects later on. And then we'll ask it to create some documentation for this specific project based on the information it learns from the official docs. So I've prepared that prompt. I'll paste it into both windows. So as you can see, I want to build an ElizaOS agent system. Here are the documentation links to learn from. I've just listed some of the most important ones for the purpose of this demo. And then I've finished the prompt by saying, study these and help me build a working agent system from scratch. Don't create any files yet, just review the docs and confirm that you understand. So what we want here is both models to review the documentation. They're going to have the same knowledge then and context of what we're trying to build and what platform we're working on. And then from there, we will prompt for some code and docs. So I'll send both prompts through now. We can see it as well, how long each model takes to review the documentation. Claude Code is asking for permission to fetch the docs, which we will approve. We just hit enter here to say yes so that it can access those links. Okay, so Claude Code has responded first. And we can see here it's got a pretty detailed response. It says, I understand the framework, architecture and concepts. Here's what I learned. ElizaOS overview, TypeScript-based AI agent framework for autonomous agents. Supports 90+ plugins. Agents have personalities, goals, and can take real-world actions. Core architecture, agent runtime, plugin system, memory system, state management. Key components, agents, AI personalities with memory and capabilities. Characters, configuration, defining personality, bio, and plugins. Plugins, extend functionality, Bootstrap for core. SQL for database, knowledge for RAG, memory, persistent room-based conversation state, development setup. It's also listed a few things there. It says character.json, the actual character file is a TypeScript file, so we might have to correct it on that. On the left-hand side, we need to approve the commands that GPT-5 is asking, so we had to approve their confirmation that it can search those links. So GPT-5 on the other side is now conducting its research. Okay, so GPT-5 got stuck searching the links for quite a while. I had to interrupt and just say, you're still searching the links, just to confirm it was still working. It then came back and said, I paused external lookups and will proceed based on the provided docs and prior knowledge. No files created yet as requested. It's then confirmed its understanding of ElizaOS, so core concepts, agents with a persona profile, event-driven runtime loop, memory, tools and actions, evaluators and schedules, workflows, architecture, core runtime, adapters, clients connect to channels, providers handle LLMs, embeddings and storage, plugins add capabilities, development flow, initialize a project, define agent config, register plugins, wire providers, and implement any custom actions or evaluators. Plugins or bootstrap plugin exists to assemble a default capable agent quickly. Plugins declare manifests and register actions, evaluators, hooks to extend behavior. If you want, I can outline a minimal end-to-end build plan. Then we'll implement it step by step. So judging by GPT-5's response, it looks like it understands the ElizaOS system and how it works. There's a bit more detail in Claude Code's response. It was a bit more specific about some of the features and functionality, but both seem to understand the architecture and how the system works based off the initial prompt and research. So now we'll follow up with another prompt and see what documentation it creates for our specific project directories here that we've built. As mentioned, they are empty at the moment, so we'll just ask it to create some base documentation that we can refer to while we do work on some projects on top of ElizaOS. So we'll see what the response is with the next prompt. Okay, so I've copy pasted the next prompt over to both GPT-5 and Claude Code. We can see here, based on the ElizaOS documentation, create a development guide.md that explains what ElizaOS is and its core architecture, how actions providers, evaluators and services work, the character TypeScript file structure and configuration, plugin development basics, and how to build a multi-agent system. So this test is essentially to test their understanding of ElizaOS now that it's consumed the documentation, and we want to see how much detail and what it actually responds with when we ask it to create this development guide. So this will be an internal reference so that when we prompt GPT-5 and Claude Code in future, it should be referring to this development guide to assist with some of its responses and coding. So it's an important prompt here to test, and we'll see how they both respond. So we can see here GPT-5 planning its next moves. There's text output, so you can see exactly what its thinking pattern is. On the right hand side we can see Claude Code using tokens as it thinks through the problem. Okay, so GPT-5 looks like it's now moving ahead by adding a development guide.md. Okay, Claude Code has finished. We can see here underneath is where it's suggested the development guide, and it's asking me to approve the edit. So I'll just move it up to this window so we can have a look. GPT-5 has also just finished. It hasn't asked me for permission to write a new file, it's just written it. So we can compare the two here, side by side. It's asking me to either undo or keep. I'm going to click keep, and on the Claude Code side I'm just going to accept these changes so they're a bit easier to read. We'll just see once, we might let them finish their thinking process actually, just to see if they do make any other changes. Claude Code has finished. GPT-5 has also just finished, so Claude Code has then also followed up with a response. I've created the guide. Here's what I've included in the guide. Provides everything needed to understand ElizaOS architecture and build sophisticated AI agent systems. GPT-5 will expand this window a little bit. I created a development guide with a concise structured guide per your request. What I added, overview, everything we've asked it to do. Do you want any tweaks? Let me know. So what we'll do now is we'll get both development guides up side by side and we'll compare and see what the differences are in their responses here. Okay, so we can see there are some similarities with how GPT-5 and Claude Code have created the development guides. We can see they've got a similar layout with the sections. So what is ElizaOS? Both have that, core architecture. Then they talk about agent runtime. The plugin system is then mentioned. Memory is also mentioned by both. Actions is then mentioned. And there's some code as well. There's a bit more detail in the code by the look of it on Claude Code's side. It's split a bit here by GPT-5. Then there's providers. So again, providers by both, evaluators. So they've both followed the same structure based on the prompt. They've then both got a breakdown on the character file structure and configuration. So we can see here GPT-5 has provided a project structure breakdown as well as some code examples. Claude Code has provided the code examples only, but a bit more extensive in terms of the code it's provided. It's also mentioned some configuration best practices. So it looks like a bit more code has been provided by Claude Code for the character file specifically. And then for plugins, GPT-5 has gone straight into the code for the plugins and some instructions there on creating it. Claude Code, on the other hand, has created a bit more context up front about the plugin development workflow and then provided some code, so a bit more in depth, a bit more extensive on the Claude Code side. Multi-agent patterns is then the next section. So again, they've followed very similar document structures. Claude Code again though has laid out this information and broken down the introduction section a bit more clearly. GPT-5 has summarized some of the multi-agent system information and then gone into some code as well. On the Claude Code side, we can see it's then also included some commands that are important for creating a project. So that's something that GPT-5 didn't include. We can see here it's got all of the CLI commands that we need to run to create new projects. So pretty similar in terms of the structure they've provided, but Claude Codes from first view looks like it's a bit more extensive and specific in terms of using that as a context guide for building. What I might do now is give each development guide to Claude Code in an existing Eliza project that I'm working on. It has a lot more context on what ElizaOS is and how it works. So I'll give both guides to Claude Code in that project in a separate window, and we'll see what it thinks. We'll ask it to compare both development guides and tell us which one comes out on top. Okay, so here is Claude Code's analysis of both development guides. It is saying that the winner is Claude Code by a significant margin, so that's interesting. We'll see why it's decided that. Response quality comparison, it's saying for GPT-5's approach, concise and technical, practical focus, minimal fluff. For Claude Code's approach, it's saying comprehensive and educational, structured learning, complete coverage. The key differences: documentation comprehension depth. GPT-5 correctly identifies core components, shows good understanding of plugin types, but it misses some important information. It doesn't explain the why behind the architecture decisions. Claude Code demonstrated superior understanding, complete component coverage, and architecture reasoning. Regarding the character configuration, GPT-5's basic character structure is shown. Focus is on runtime configuration, and there's an error. It's still referencing some JSON patterns. Claude Code, on the other hand, complete character structure with actual TypeScript interface, detailed explanation of each configuration section, best practices included, and practical examples that are immediately usable. So a big tick there for Claude Code. Plugin development explanation, again, Claude Code comes out on top. Comprehensive plugin workflow. The weakness on the GPT-5 response, overly simplified examples, whereas Claude Code included some real-world patterns and development best practices. The multi-agent system design, GPT-5 basic multi-agent concepts, and missing here, it lacks depth on agent communication. Claude Code, on the other hand, multiple architecture patterns, detailed communication strategies, 5 distinct multi-agent patterns with use cases, best practices section for production systems. Technical accuracy and detail. GPT-5 does have the correct TypeScript interfaces, despite a few of those JSON references. Good code structure, but the issue that has been identified here is that some simplified assumptions about ElizaOS internals. Claude Code, on the other hand, accurate ElizaOS interfaces, complete lifecycle explanations, and production considerations. So, a few weaknesses here for GPT-5: lacks educational depth, missing architecture context, incomplete multi-agent coverage, and no best practices guidance. Claude Code's weaknesses, on the other hand, could be considered verbose for experienced developers and more time consuming to read through, not really big weaknesses in the grand scheme of things. If we're trying to compare what's the most effective agent for helping us build projects and code, I'm not too worried about these weaknesses. So it looks like a big win here for Claude Code. And if we see here the scoring breakdown, it's also provided some criteria and a score for each. And we can see here clearly Claude wins in every section. So from this first test, we can see that Claude Code is the big winner. GPT-5 is great at extracting technical information quickly, perfect for experienced developers who need quick reference, but Claude Code demonstrating superior learning comprehension by understanding not just what ElizaOS does, but why it's designed the way it is and how to use it effectively in production. So an interesting review and analysis there. There's some really big differences here in the scoring from GPT-5 versus Claude Code. So that's test one. What I'm going to do for the next test is ask both to now create a character file, and we'll see which one creates the best character file and if there's any glaring omissions or issues with the character files they create. That'll give us a good idea on which one is actually the best coding model, as the character files are TypeScript files, so they'll need to code and produce TypeScript files for this next task. And just for context, let's quickly take a look at a character file in ElizaOS to see what we're expecting from GPT-5 and Claude Code in this next test. You can see here, this is the template character file you get when you create a new ElizaOS project. It starts with the name of the agent at the top, so that a character file is the file that essentially has all the information and rules and the role and the tasks and the system prompt for an agent that you're building in your multi-agent system. In this case, the template name for the agent is Eliza. We've then got a plugins section where you can assign all of the plugins that are available for that agent. In this case, for example, we've got the OpenAI plugin and the Anthropic plugin so that they can use those models for response generation. We've then got Discord and Twitter plugins here that they can use to access and publish posts on Discord and Twitter. Again, this is an example, so may or may not be included in our actual character file prompt we provide during the test. We've then got settings, so this is where you would include any other settings. We've then got a system prompt. This is essentially an overview of how the agents should respond and behave. You can see in this example here, respond to all messages in a helpful conversational manner, provide assistance on a wide range of topics using knowledge when needed. So again, this system prompt is essentially how it should act. A bio section is then provided here where it essentially gives a bit more background information on the agent. A few examples you can see here: uses knowledge resources effectively when needed, engages with all types of questions and conversations. Topics is the next section, which is just topics it can discuss. There's then message examples, so these are messages that it can refer to as context on how it should respond to users in real conversations. So we can see here that this is included to show it examples of how it should respond. We've then got some style guidelines at the bottom, so use clear and direct language, be engaging and conversational. So these are just points to consider on how it should respond when it's sending messages. So that's a character file overview. So we'll jump in now and prompt GPT-5 and Claude Code and see if it comes up with a character file that follows this structure closely and is effective and usable and production ready. Okay, so we're back in our split screen setup now. You can see the prompt I've provided here for both models. It is, I need an agent named CloudBot that handles customer billing inquiries for Cloud Sync solutions. So we've just made up a fake business and scenario here for it to follow. This agent should embody Cloud Sync's brand, friendly, helpful, tech-savvy, and solution-oriented. Handle common billing questions, use Cloud Sync's communication style, be patient with frustrated customers about billing issues. So we're giving it a lot of information here that it can just copy-paste essentially and plug into the character file. The important thing is that it actually responds with a character file that follows the same structure as the example we just showed. We've then got a bit more context, and then your task: create a complete character.ts file that implements this CloudBot agent for Cloud Sync solutions. We've been very specific about what it needs to include, proper TypeScript structure and imports. We'll see how it goes. So we've got the exact same prompt copy and pasted in the Claude Code window on the right as well. So we'll hit enter on both of those, and we'll wait and see what the response is. So they should both write a new file in the project directory. It should be a TypeScript file that follows the character template. So we should see plugins, a system prompt, a bio section, topics section, message examples, the style section. We should see everything exactly as we just showed it in the example file. If it has studied the documentation properly and created that development guide for this purpose, then it should be able to respond with a production ready character file. So we can see the thought process for GPT-5. GPT-5 looks like it has gone ahead and written the file quicker. Actually, they were both pretty much similar in terms of how long they took to respond. GPT-5 still going. Claude Code's finished, so we'll accept Claude Code's what it's created. GPT-5 still going, so it's still writing some message examples here, as we can see. It looks like it's followed pretty well the starting process, where it's got plugins, name. Claude Code's included a name, but I can't see any plugins. Looks like it's out of order a bit. The plugins are there, but they're down the bottom. Okay, so they've both finished. So again, we've jumped over to the other project where we've asked Claude Code to analyze both responses against the template character file to see which one's better, which one's more closely aligned with the template example. We can see here again, Claude Code is the clear winner according to this analysis. It's then broken it down by each section. So technical structure analysis, the TypeScript implementation is slightly different in both files, and as we can see here, Claude Codes matches that official template structure exactly. GPT-5's is a bit different. Template adherence is therefore a tick for Claude Code. GPT-5 uses different export pattern and template. Message examples use role content structure, which doesn't match the template. It includes fields not in the template: model provider, username, and clients. Model provider is a plugin field, not an import field. Claude Code, perfect template match, uses export correctly, correct message structure, and standard field structure. So it follows the template conventions perfectly. Brand implementation analysis. GPT-5 here has basic brand compliance, uses we voice as requested, limited cloud metaphors, professional but somewhat generic. Claude Codes is a bit more in depth. Think of us as your personal cloud concierge. Perfect we voice usage throughout all examples. Sync up their billing questions, back up and running, so natural cloud metaphors as well. Brand personality shines. So again, another tick for Claude Code. Message examples quality, GPT-5 examples. They look to be okay based on the feedback, but Claude Codes again is just slightly better according to this analysis. Knowledge and domain expertise, again pretty similar, but it's just given another tick to Claude Code. It's gone into a bit more detail in terms of the comprehensive pricing structure. detailed business processes, real-world scenarios, so it's gone a bit further in terms of the specifics that it's provided for this character file. Topics coverage, we can see GPT-5 13 relevant billing topics, good coverage of core areas. Claude Code, on the other hand, 15 comprehensive topics, including discount and promotion codes, enterprise billing, more specific scenarios covered, better customer journey mapping. Plugin and configuration, the Discord integration is slightly different in the way that it's provided. You can see GPT-5 has used this name value here. That's not the way that it's laid out in the official template. Claude Code, on the other hand, has used that proper plugin array structure and separate client config. So again, if we compare that to the character file, Claude Code matches perfectly and GPT-5's gone a bit different. So that's another tick for Claude Code. And we can see here there's just a few specific examples where Claude Code has excelled, and then a breakdown again. So Claude wins every category again. And the bottom line here that the analysis is finished with is GPT-5 is built to spec, Claude Code is built for success. So it's saying it's a clear winner. So again, both tests, Claude Code has come out on top. So if we'll go back and just have another look at the responses in the split screen and just see the exact differences again in that view. Okay, so we're back in the side-by-side view now, and just to sum up, having looked through the files a bit closer, Claude Code is definitely a bit better. The only difference is where GPT-5 comes out on top is the structure of the file. So while Claude Code did create all of the sections required, it's just done it in a different order to what that template file is. So rather than having the plugins, the name and the system prompt up the top, it's started with the name, bio, message examples up the top here, the topic style, it's got knowledge, and then the plugins are down the bottom. So it's just a little bit out of order. It doesn't affect the functionality, but it's not the best adherence to the template structure based on how it's laid it out. Apart from that though, everything else is a tick for Claude Code as opposed to GPT-5. So to sum up, Claude Code is still the winner here in my view, from both the documentation understanding point of view and that development guide creation test, and also the character file creation test. So both tests, there is a tick to Claude Code. I did like the response from GPT-5, the way it laid it out, how it showed me that full file in that window, and then I actually had to follow up and prompt to say write that to a file within this project directory, whereas Claude Code allows me to just accept the changes and it creates the file automatically. So while it was a nice response to be able to see all that code within the window, it did have an extra step where I then had to prompt it to write to the file. So those are the differences at the moment from this is a first initial test. I would say that Claude Code still comes out on top. The other consideration is probably cost. So Claude Code obviously is about $100 at the moment, maybe more for the max plan. GPT-5 potentially is available on the standard professional plan with OpenAI, which I think maybe is $30. So that cost factor is something that you need to consider as well. This has only been a very brief test, but based on the output, I think the cost difference might be a factor. So for some people who are looking to save money and not spend as much, you could probably just use GPT-5 and get similar results to Claude Code. So it's not drastically worse to the point where you would pay that extra money just to get Claude Code. So again, Claude Code's the winner. If you want to see some more tests on GPT-5 versus Claude Code to see if one model over the other excels in any other specific scenarios, let me know in the comments below, and I'll record some more videos with some more test scenarios. So thanks for watching.